tonight we have Elizabeth Crowley, who has very graciously come to speak to us as a candidate for Queens Borough President. The other two candidates that were rival candidates were invited. One sent regrets. The incumbent, Donovan Richards, did send in regrets. The other candidate, Bramer, we hasn't heard from. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn this to our sergeant in arms, and we'll do this pledge of allegiance. Everyone please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just quickly, the rules, Elizabeth's going to make a 3-minute opening statement. Our panel is going to hear Joseph Segretti and Mary Ellen Burrell. And they have a lot of questions. We're trying to get through as many as we can and kind of rank them on whether they're the most important questions. One-part question is a 1-minute answer. Two-part question is 2. If it's a 3-part question, it's good. They'll say 1 minute to answer, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes when they ask the question. And our sergeant at arms is going to time it, and the idea is to get as many questions in, and then Elizabeth will do the closing statement at 7:45 and she does have another event. So thank you everyone for being here, and we can make your opening statement.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Charles Ober. It's great to be back here at the Ridgewood Property Owners and Civic Association. My name is Elizabeth Crowley, and I'm a candidate for Queens Borough President. Many of you are familiar with me because I had the distinct privilege and pleasure to represent you as a New York City Council member for 9 years. I grew up in Queens, born and raised, and I raised my own children here. My son Owen is here today, and I have a son named Dennis, and they went to our local schools. We right now have a crisis on our hands. When COVID hit, Queens was so vulnerable. We had the most overcrowded schools, the most overcrowded trains, and the fewest hospital beds. And it's wreaked havoc on our borough's economy now. We need a true fighter. When I grew up here, I grew up the 14th of 15 children. And I often joke saying I knew how to fight for fair share because I grew up in a family with so many brothers and sisters fighting for fair share. But my family taught me to fight for what was right and what I believed in and to not back down. We need a fighter for Queens now more than ever. We need a fighter for our fair share, a fighter that's going to protect our schools. Right now, the mayor is looking to end gifted and talented programs, change the way students get into specialized high schools. Every student in Queens needs access to a local good school in their neighborhood. I'm going to fight to put more patrol officers on our streets. Over the past year, we've seen over 5,000 officers retire, and we have the fewest that we've had in many, many years. And because of that, we've seen a real increase in crime. People are afraid to take our subways. And too many of our neighbors are being targeted for what they look like. Queens is a place where we cannot accept hate. We need to rid the borough of hate, bigotry, and violence. We need to also make sure that we stand up for our middle-class families. We're paying the highest property taxes in the entire city and have the fewest affordable housing dollars. I'm going to fight for Queens property owners and for those who want to become an owner so that they can have the real opportunity for home ownership. We need to make Queens more affordable again. I'm prepared to fight. When I was elected to the New York City Council, it was after the worst economic recession that we had since the Great Depression. It was 2008. And we were looking at closures of firehouses. I fought the mayor at that time with many communities to save those firehouses, and we won. When the speaker at the time of the council was not giving fair amounts to every district, I fought that policy, and we were able to change that policy to make sure that every council district got its fair share of funding. And if you remember, when I became the council member, this district, the school district, was the most overcrowded in this whole city. I fought to make sure that we got funding to build new schools, and we built over 6,000 classroom seats. One of those schools was right here in Ridgewood, and it was the first time we were able to build a school in 100 years. We worked on many good projects together. Of course, with the leadership of Paul Kersner, we were able to make a historic landmark, the largest landmark outside of Manhattan, largest landmark in Queens, 3 contiguous districts, and over 1,100, and I'm almost finishing up, I'm getting my time, and over 1,100 different buildings. And with the leadership of this Property Owners and Civic Association, we were able to plant hundreds of trees right here, making Ridgewood a more livable community to want to raise a family and to retire and to just open a business. It's great to be back here at Ridgewood Property Owners, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here with you tonight.
Welcome. All right, first question is on education. You touched on it. Do you support the maintaining of the special test examination process for admission to the New York City Specialized High School?
Yes, the state law protects. Okay.
Pretty much 1 minute.
1 minute per question, okay?
This is the. This is a state law that protects access to the specialized high schools. In my opinion, I consider them the excellent high schools. They're really set apart from any other high schools in the city. Those 3 high schools are Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech, and Bronx Science. Now, the test has included more schools for those students who are high performers, but they just don't make the cut for those 3 schools. I am committed to protecting the test for those 3 schools. We need to diversify the schools, but the way we do that is by making sure that we have strong education programs in every community in this city. We can get there. And when we have good high schools in the city that are hard to get into, we can replicate those schools here in Queens. A good example of that is the Frank Sinatra School for the Arts. Many of the students who couldn't get into LaGuardia because there weren't enough seats for that school in Manhattan, that's been known for generations as one of the best art schools in the country. Now we have another one right here in Queens, and we need to do programs like that for science and technology as well.
Now we're going to move into crime. We're skipping around. Anti-Asian crime is rampant. What can be done? 1 minute.
First, I'm against defunding the police. I'm the only candidate in this race. Last year, a significant amount of money was taken out of the NYPD's budget at budget time. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, we have so many officers, over 5,000 this year, that just retired. Crime is on the rise. Hate crime is on the rise. We need to make sure that we prosecute hate crimes to the fullest extent of the law. Nobody in our community should have to worry about being attacked for what they look like, or what religion they belong to, whatever gender they are. We need to protect our communities. We need to build tolerance, educate our children about how we are stronger because of our diversity, and how it is what makes Queens the place that is. It sets us apart from anywhere else in the world. And it is our diversity that gives us our strength. And there is no tolerance for hate, not anywhere, not in any neighborhood here in Queens.
Question on zoning and housing. The current administration supports upzoning many parts of the city, including Queens, allowing for more development. Do you support this? Can Queens handle more population? Would you support downzoning parts of Queens to protect existing tenants from displacement caused by aggressive overdevelopment?
That's a very good question. Queens has a population of approximately 2.4 million residents. We've grown faster than our infrastructure has grown, and we do not have enough affordable housing. The problem that we have is infrastructure. If we provide the infrastructure, then the growth potential can be made possible. And I have a plan to open our railways. One of those is Lower Montauk branch that comes through Ridgewood, where properties that are currently underutilized and are manufacturing similar type railroads run through Astoria, the Triborough extension, and the old Rockaway right-of-way. There's potential to link up all three of those rails and improve our transit. Here we are, right? We were hit the hardest by COVID, and now we have a new president who is saying that we're going to have a significant infrastructure project, right? We're going to have a $2-point-something trillion budget for infrastructure projects. We need to make sure we get our fair share in Queens. And by the way, I am the only candidate that is not taking from developers. And this is not just for this year. This has been last year, and I'm somebody. And it's important with the Queens Borough President, because planning is a big part of the leadership of the Borough President, that they don't take from developers.
So how do you feel about the upzoning that the mayor has proposed?
There are a lot of proposals that the mayor makes that never happen and that I have opposed. It depends where. When I first became a council member, we downzoned certain areas of the district, would say Community Board 5, including Ridgewood, and we upzoned certain areas where it was appropriate, closer to the train or on the main avenues. So it needs to be a careful, thought-out proposal, and you can't just say yes or no. You have to see the particular proposal that's being put forth. Community, community, community. That's what's most important.
Now to seniors. What will you do to help seniors age in place?
Earlier in my opening statement, I mentioned how Queens pays the highest property taxes of all the 5 boroughs. It's not just a statement made. There's been a commission put together by the current mayor, although no action has been taken, that millionaires in Brooklyn and in Manhattan, properties worth 10 times as much as certain properties here in Queens, are actually paying less. Many of our seniors are homeowners, and that property tax is a big burden. I'm going to fight to reduce the property taxes here in Queens. I also have a plan to take away the fare on buses so that our seniors could not have to pay. I know seniors are paying reduced bus fares, but that they could get a free bus fare so that they could save in the cost of transportation. And I work expeditiously to reopen our senior centers. Most of our seniors are vaccinated. They've had access to vaccinations. They need their centers back where they could be with their friends and enjoy company of others.
On transit, do you believe the administration's Vision Zero is working? Do you have any alternative ideas to help make the streets and sidewalks safer for pedestrians and cyclists?
Transit question on Vision Zero. Well, an indication of Vision Zero's success is the fewer traffic fatalities and crashes. And in that metric, one would say yes, it's saving lives. However, there's much more that we could do to share the roads in a way where bikers are safer and out of traffic. And I propose that we have a better protected bike lane area, such as the rails that I propose to activate. I would like to have dedicated bike lanes in those rights-of-ways, as well as the free buses taking more cars off the road so that we have fewer people depending on a vehicle. It's becoming increasingly expensive to operate and own a vehicle in the city, and we need to make transit more affordable. And, you know, like we run this system that's already 80% subsidized, 85% subsidized. Believe it or not, more people take the bus and train when it doesn't cost money.
I don't know if I would agree with that, because currently there's more people driving, which is more expensive because they're afraid of the subways. So I don't think it's a cost issue. I think it's a
Well, they're
a
taking
crime
the
issue.
buses, and they took the buses when COVID hit. They were taking the buses, and they were free. The buses were free. But you're absolutely right. People need to feel safe on the subways, and that's a crime, public safety issue for sure.
In keeping with that, just on a personal note, I would have reworded that question to say, do you have alternative ideas to help make streets and sidewalks safer for pedestrians from bicyclists? Because as a pedestrian, I fear for my life because they do not seem to realize that the traffic signals and the stop signs apply to them. Do you have any
Well, the
thoughts on
bikers
how to-
should not be on the sidewalks, and that needs to be better regulated, especially on avenues or roads like Fresh Pond Road, Myrtle Avenue. And that bikers the rules need to be enforced, and they should not be biking where pedestrians are walking.
So it's a police issue?
It's a regulation, yeah. I mean, it could be a DOT regulator out there. It doesn't necessarily have to be a police officer, but we need to be regulating our roads and our sidewalks for sure, so people don't feel that their safety's threatened because of bikers.
To homelessness. New York City's current approach to addressing homelessness appears to be a return to past failed solutions. What innovative approaches to addressing homelessness would you support or propose?
That's a very good question. Under de Blasio, a bad situation has gotten a whole lot worse. And it seems in the past year it's unmanageable, certainly, for this administration. We need real affordable housing, and we need to make sure that those people who suffer with significant mental health diagnoses are getting access to health care and not finding home or shelter in our subway system. With de Blasio, he had said that he was going to be the mayor that was going to bridge income inequality and build affordable housing. There was no real affordable housing built, not right here in Queens, and truly not that much around the city, not for the needs that we have. There is currently talk and ideas going about the buildings in Manhattan that were built, that are commercial buildings that are not getting tenants in as quickly as they would like, or because of this new world we live in post-COVID, that there should be opportunities to turn commercial into residential. And if I could think of one great example of when it was done just right with the community involvement was in Ridgewood, when there was an old manufacturing building, and there was a proposal for residents to change it into a housing building. We were able to do a special zone where it was commercial on the ground floor and residential above, and you could do that. You can do that in Manhattan as well, and you have opportunities now, I think, more than ever, that people want to be living closer to work.
You mentioned it before, but let's talk a little more about real estate taxes. Property taxes are rising at times by double digits, and we want to know what tax reform changes do you think are needed or possible to protect especially small homeowners and small landlords?
I'm hoping that we get a very sensible mayor, because this budget has grown out of control. The city budget is like $96 billion. It's hard to know from what was proposed to what will actually happen for this upcoming June, but there was no savings put aside. And we're really living in a terribly uncertain time. The budget relies heavily on the tax burden, and we need to start thinking of other ways of bringing revenue into the city and sustainable ways of spending. We need to be more fiscally responsible. What I do know with certainty that I will fight for as the next borough president, given the opportunity to represent, I will fight for a fairer property tax system. I will take the recommendations by the commission and make it a top priority of the next administration, so that we could relieve the burden, the excessive burden that our Queens homeowners are facing right now.
to education again. Do you support returning control of schools to borough-level school boards?
No.
And why not?
I think that there was it depended on what, just like schools today, you have some districts where you have, and you can go anywhere in the district and you can have a good school. And then there are other districts where it's harder to find a good school. That needs to change. We need to make sure that every district, students have access to good schools. But we need to keep the mayor accountable. We need somebody accountable. And for example, a borough president, when you have the board of education like we had in the past, each individual school board were elected representatives, it was harder to hold them accountable. As it is, we could hold the mayor more accountable, and I believe it just becomes so bureaucratic, and there's too many chiefs. You know, there's too many people making decisions when we really need a hierarchy when it comes to accountability, like schools. And I do think they improved when we had Bloomberg as mayor. His policies did improve our schools.
Next question, going back to crime. Do you believe the recent uptick in crime is related to the bail reform legislation that was passed?
Yes, I do believe it is related to that. I also believe it's related to our local district attorneys and their willingness to prosecute. But what scares me the most is those that are getting arrested for carrying illegal guns. And we had a no-tolerance policy. That is no longer in place. We need to get back to that policy because it is the guns and the shootings that are happening in our communities that are incredibly dangerous. And the guns need to get off the street.
Related to that is the closure of Rikers Island. Do you agree with that? And do you think it's related to the bail reform legislation and the new Kew Gardens jail? Is it a good idea to have that jail there for us Queens residents? What can we do to keep it from negatively impacting us?
Okay. Whether somebody goes to jail or is sent home without having bail put on them, right? So when you go to jail, either you're remanded without bail or you can't post bail. Judges are not considering whether there's a seat available at Rikers Island for someone. It's just a jail, a temporary housing facility. When somebody is sentenced and convicted of a crime, they're usually sent upstate. If their sentence is less than a year, they'll send them to Rikers. However, I propose that any sentence, it only takes a few hours to get to the jail upstate. That's where you're supposed to go. It's actually a prison. When you're sentenced, you go to prison. As for jails here, I'm against building a new jail in Kew Gardens. I'm in support of using it as an existing jail, as it is currently zoned for use. And as for the Rikers Island thing, closing Rikers Island is something I support. I don't think that has anything to do with the rising crime. There's no connection there. Any rising crime may have to do with bail reform or people being out on the street that should either be in jail or in a healthcare facility taking care of their healthcare needs.
Back to education. Some New York City charter schools have consistently demonstrated their ability to deliver improved student performance. Do you support expanding the successful charter school models in Queens?
I support public education. First and foremost, we need to get that right. And I am not against charter schools. Many of the charter schools are raising money as a non-profit corporation. And I support their efforts, and I do support efforts of giving government funding to our charter schools, but I am in support of public education first. It works 95% of the time. We need to find those failing schools and figure out what's happening there. Put in new leadership and fix it from top to bottom. And again, I'm open to charter schools. I have nothing against charter schools. But, you know, my sons went to local public schools and they got a very good education right here in Queens.
Seniors. Many New York City pensioners leave New York for lower tax rate states. Do you support raising the $20,000 exemption on taxable pension income?
That's something I'm open to. I never had that question posed before. So if you want to expand it, it's a.
Okay, but they can support it. They can advocate.
It's a state tax right now.
Well, you're allowed up to $20,000. They won't tax you, so you know there's no harm in staying.
And what would be a good amount?
At least to have it indexed so that it
Sure.
goes up, you know, with inflation like many other issues.
That's
hasn't
that's
been raised
sensible.
in many years. A lot of people's pensions are much higher than $20,000 now.
Sure, that. Yes, that makes total sense. $20,000 a year is poverty level, and our seniors are struggling enough. When someone is collecting pension, I would be open to exploring just what the number should be when they get taxed at. What is the right number?
Transit. Do you support the LaGuardia Airport Air Train project? Why or why not?
I generally support transit projects. That wouldn't have been the infrastructure improvement I would have planned for. I personally like the idea of expanding the N train so that you have a New York City train going directly to the airport. What I do support is making the Long Island Railroad much more affordable for Queens residents and having it be part of the one-swipe system. The majority of the funding for Long Island Railroad does come from transactions that happen in New York City, but we're supporting Long Island residents most of the time who are commuting into the city, coming through our borough, providing a lot of burden without much benefit. It is time the Long Island Railroad provide benefit for the people of Queens, and that includes running more trains and making those trains more affordable. So if that train is going to LaGuardia, I support making it more affordable for our seniors and for our New Yorkers so that they could take it.
Thank you. Immigration. Do you agree that New York City should be a sanctuary city? Why or why not?
I tend to agree with that. I think that we've seen fewer immigrants come to the country in the past 10 years. I think this has been the decade where we've had the fewest. I've started to go to restaurants again post-COVID. They're having an extremely hard time finding people to work. And I believe that we are the borough that we are because so many of us are newcomers. My grandparents were immigrants, and they came here to Queens with nothing in their pocket but just the American dream. Yep. And we need to keep that American dream real and alive right here in Queens. And that's why I'm running for Queens Borough President.
What do you propose to encourage job and small business development in Queens?
Thank you. Our small businesses have been hardest hit by COVID. Too many have closed. We need direct subsidies, helping our businesses reopen, helping our businesses pay rent, subsidizing the cost of employees a wage retention subsidy. The longer they stay, the more of a wage subsidy that could be placed upon them. We need creative economic development opportunities that entrepreneurs are willing to take the chance again to reopen and work so hard as they do, because those small businesses are truly the backbone of our communities. It is what sets communities apart. Look how many strong, vibrant, small businesses we have in Ridgewood. It's so much a part of the fabric of our community. So it too would be a high priority of my administration to make sure that the office was there in communities, the communities felt that they didn't have to go to Borough Hall to get the services for small businesses that are offered through the administration.
As a follow-up, anything specific that might help the actual retail storefront sector? Because most commercial strips in the city and Queens especially, you'll see many vacant storefronts.
Right.
Business development might occur elsewhere, but not necessarily on a retail strip.
So we feel the property tax burden as homeowners, but the property tax burden is much larger for those with commercial spaces, and that gets transferred on to whomever rents out the space. So doing a program where if your rent was $3,000 a month for the next 12 months, and you were coming and you were thinking about reopening, if there was a program that supported a fraction of that cost of your rent every month, and then you paid it and then submitted the paperwork and then you were reimbursed, that's sort of like a rent subsidy program. There are tax breaks like that happening currently. There were like 200,000 some odd restaurants that applied for the Biden administration's tax credit that just went live yesterday. There needs to be those types of tax breaks in the city budget that they're negotiating right now that could transfer. And same with that, that's when I say wage subsidy. It's also, if you're willing to take on 2 employees instead of just 1, then we could help pay for 30% of their wage, as long as you keep them employed for a certain number of months. And then you are helping the people find employment as well as keep the business, the burden of operating the costs lower.
Parks Department, is there any situation where you would support the sale or development of existing parkland?
It would be very difficult for me to support the sale of parkland because it's so few. Even though we are fortunate here in Queens to have more green space than most of the boroughs in the city, once you give it away, it never comes back. There'd have to be some type of program where there was a swap where we knew we were getting green space back, and there'd have to be a community-involved plan, and it'd have to be a benefit overall to the community for something like that to be approved.
This came up when there was that proposal a few years back to make a racetrack inside Flushing Meadow Park. There was a large section of the park would have been given away to them.
Well, I'm glad they didn't do that. There's enough activities happening at the park. We need to fix the park's green space. We need to make those companies that are doing business there more accountable to the rest of the park, such as the U.S. Open.
Thank you.
Crime, do you support the enforcement of quality of life ordinances? They seem to have all gone by the wayside now. Anything is allowable.
No, I do. I don't think that we could operate as a city that would attract tourists if we didn't have a level of enforcement. That's one great thing about New York, is that we are so attractive to so many other cities. People want to come here and enjoy vacation, and they can't do that if we have dirty streets. So sanitation enforcement is incredibly important, and it will be a priority given the opportunity to be your next borough president.
For seniors again, do you support extending the SCREE program to include 1- and 2-family houses?
Yes, I do.
And for those that don't know, that's the Senior Citizen Rent Increase Exemption Program, where their rent would be frozen for as long as they live there, and the increases in the rent would be paid by the city right to the landlord.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's okay. We can finish a little early. We can take questions from the audience, maybe. Hey, it's not my forum. Look at that.
We have concern with the recent suspension evictions from renters and how what's being done to help the landowners. This has to do with the landlords who rent property and were unable to evict non-paying tenants, even though they could afford it. And what's happening, but they still have to pay taxes. Is there something where the city will stop collecting taxes so that they can afford to keep their homes and not collect rents?
As far as I know, there is a program that the state legislature put in place for landlords in those types of situations. That was just in the budget, the state budget that passed April 1st. I do believe, especially our small 1 to 3 family landlords, homeowners / landlords, or any landlord, no one should have to take advantage of the situation. Look, seriously, there are people suffering right now because of COVID and not able to pay the rent. And but at the same time, so are those landlords, right, who have the bills that don't go away, especially the tax bill. I support government programs to give back the tax credit and to make right a situation that has gone terribly wrong. If that answers your question, there are programs. These landlords must take advantage of the programs, and they must be fair. And I'll make sure that my office is there to advocate and fight for them as well. But I think it's important that we be a little sensitive at this time, too, and know that there are a lot of people suffering with the crisis.
Firstly, thank you for coming over. So my wife is Chinese and is a high school teacher. She was a victim of an anti-Asian hate attack this morning from somebody who was quite obviously schizophrenic. This was in the middle of Flushing, and she was at the end of a school fire drill at the school where she's a teacher, and it was in the school parking lot. Oh, can we still hear that? Her concern, the police were very helpful, but her concern is the fact that this person was mentally ill, or very obviously displayed the signs thereof. Do you have any plans to deal with mental health issues, particularly amongst perhaps our homeless population?
Simon, how is your wife doing?
She's okay now, thanks. So she managed to escape, but while she was being interviewed by the police in the precinct on Northern Boulevard, the same guy attacked another woman and very seriously beat her up, literally 5 minutes later. So this is something that's very, very real to me. And also 2 doors or 3 doors down from me, one of our neighbors was attacked at 59th Street and 2nd Avenue just by the bridge in Manhattan. And she's quite seriously hurt. She's got a damaged eye and may have some longer-term facial damage. And she's 70 years old. So this is something hitting our community right now. And again, she believed it was somebody who was suffering mental health issues.
Sure. That's a very good question. Simon, what you weren't here a little earlier when I answered some public safety questions, so I'm going to repeat a little bit of where I stand. Right now, that is very controversial. It's part of the reason the city council defunded the police department last year, because of situations where people are in mental health crises. I'm very sensitive to people with mental health needs. That's part of the reason I took the position I did for closing Rikers Island. Rikers Island had a health care provider that was literally letting people die. Too many people there were not getting services or health care they deserved. I was promised a number of times by the administration that things would get better, but we finally pushed that for-profit healthcare provider out and put HHC in Hospital Corporation, and the delivery of health got much better, health care, and people were leaving there with medication and a doctor to visit. The case of what's happening when people leave Rikers Island right now, it doesn't look like they're leaving with a health care plan. But the council voted against the NYPD's budget and defunded it partly or specifically because of wanting a health care response to these types of situations. When there is somebody who is mentally ill in a crisis situation, putting a situation together where someone's life is in danger, such as what is occurring today, where they're causing physical harm to themselves or somebody else, the police need to respond and need to be there right away to stop the violent act from happening, and to bring some level of peace and protection. And that's what they're there for. I also believe that there are good ideas and good policy changes that could happen with that. EMS should come to the scene. There's a policy that you could wait in one precinct in the city. The mayor in November said he put this tactical plan together where if somebody was in a crisis situation in a home and it wasn't so dangerous that they could wait up to 2 hours for this team to get there. That seems like it's way too long to have to wait if you're in a crisis situation. People need to get to an emergency room if they're having some type of psychotic episode and they need to be given the medicines to make them whole. And if they can't live in the community because of their psychiatric disability, then we need to provide public-funded institutional spaces for them to live. You hope that with medicines today that people could live in communities and have a diagnosis but live with the right medicine and services. And it is up to us as a city to make sure we could provide that. And it's my hope that we do. But for now, when it comes to these types of situations, we need police there. We've had way too many police officers retire in the past year, and we need to get more police academy classes and put the police right where they need to be, protecting us.
Can I just add something to that? My wife does have a remaining concern because she couldn't display physical harm after the attack. The police said, we cannot categorize this as an anti-Asian hate crime. So despite the fact he was full of racial slurs, very aggressive, and she had to lock herself in the car, and then 5 minutes later beat somebody else up. So
I'll call the district attorney about that one and make sure that she looks into it, because it sounds like a hate crime to me, and we need to prosecute hate crimes. And there's a stronger sentence associated with hate crimes because we need to build tolerance and eliminate hate crimes.
I just want to mention something on that one. The main criteria on that one is that she was menaced. She was placed in fear of imminent physical injury. That's the crime in itself. Coupled with the fact that they said all those ethnic slurs, that's a hate crime. So if they try to watch it, you let them know that is a situation.
Yeah, I've had situations like that before, and then I'll do my part in advocacy, and I'll make sure that the district attorney's office knows what I know, so that they could fully investigate it, and they do. And so, what a policeman might say at the site may just be what he's particularly thinking. When they take down all the information, it is up to the district attorney's office to really prosecute what kind of crime it is.
One more question, and then close.
In my backyard. What can you do about that?
What can you do about that? Should be able to call the Department of Health. They've been just, dealing with a crisis on their hands right now. That's a really good question. I had that issue with many families during my time as a council member, and you want to make sure that they're not rabid, right? So if you feel like that they're a danger.
I don't know how tell if they're rabid or not.
I
you
know.
They come out during the day.
Yeah,
No, they
or
don't come during
come
the
at
day.
you.
They come at night. They come out
Yeah,
at night.
I mean, it's part of living close to parks. And
I don't live close by the park. It's
do you live
like-
by the train tracks? They kind of like follow the train from
well,
Long Island,
the
or
houses, garages are in the back, and the L is on top. So
If you can
I'm
encourage,
open to ideas. I mean, if they're dangerous and
You don't know
rabid,
that.
then we could
I mean,
take them
who
away.
to
and
call?
kill.
I don't even know who to call.
It is the Department of Health and Hygiene if it provides a threat. Otherwise, that you can try to call the Parks Department. They can come and capture the raccoon and bring it to Forest Park. But that
they
has anyone had that problem with raccoons?
they're more numerous now than they used to be, and
Okay.
that's a good sign of our parks and health in a certain sense. In fact, there's other wild animals in Queens that are becoming more numerous, like skunks too, believe it or not. Possums, I've had possums by my house, raccoons. Possums are good though; they eat ticks. So it's part of living in the country in a sense, but we're living here. But as far as raccoons go, I've always found if you could lure them over towards the Jackie Robinson takes care of them pretty well. Because every day I see dead ones on the Jackie Robinson.
Yes.
That brings me into the question portion of our forum. That's the end of our questions for the forum. And now Elizabeth Crowley can give us a closing statement. So you have 2 minutes to give a closing statement.
Thank you, Charles. It's been a pleasure to come back here to the Ridgewood property owners. It's like coming home. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about how important this borough president's race is. It's a crisis time, and we need a real fighter. We need a strong comeback for Queens. This campaign is like a fight, too, and I'd like you to join it. You have good ideas. I want you to stay in touch with the campaign. This campaign is not taking any funds from real estate corporations. It's everyday grassroots Queens residents. We've had over 1,000 residents of the city donate to this campaign. We have more grassroots support than any of our opponents, but it's an incredibly close election. Many people are undecided. I would like your help in this fight to make the campaign stronger as we look at what is really important to our families, to our seniors, and put plans together to make Queens better. With your help, I know we could win. I'm enlisting you to help the campaign. That's what I'd like to do tonight. Because so many voters are not paying attention to this election. And when we talk to voters, so many of them are just undecided. And we have a message. We have a message about fighting for Queens' fair share. Not only are our property owners, but also when you think about all the services, whether it's dollars for our cultural programs, for our sanitation, for our schools, we always get left behind. Queens gets the fewest dollars out of any of the boroughs. Even when it comes to the borough president's office, per capita. There should be a fairness plan. I'm ready to fight for you, with you, for a better and stronger Queens. Thank you.
Thank you for coming here. Unfortunately, we couldn't get your opponents to come here. And it's very important that we've heard what you stand for and what you are proposing to do for us here in Queens. Again, thank you for being here on behalf of the Ridgewood Property Owners and Civic Association and everyone here and all those who are watching. We're broadcasting live. And again, we're looking forward to continuing to have this good debate about the issues that are important to families and to residents of all the neighborhoods of Queens. Thank you.
And I know you have to go to another
Oh, there's
event.
one thing I wanted to say.
Yes, go right ahead.
Please visit my website. You'll see there you could email me any idea. And if you were so inclined, this campaign receives matching dollars. So anybody who makes a contribution anywhere from $10 to $175, it gets matched by the city. And that's how we get our message out there to voters. That's how we'll be able to be in the mailbox on the issues that are important, on the issues that will motivate voters to come out and vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'll just say, what our organization stands for is for equitable relationships between tenants and landlords. And we've always stood for that. We've always stood for a good, fighting for quality of life in the neighborhood for everyone. And equity in terms of real estate development. We do not want to have real estate development that damages and destroys our neighborhood, uproots our tenants, and our residents and all of us who are homeowners. So that's what we stand for. And so supporting our organization is extremely important when it comes to issues about taxation, security, police, and regulation. We're having serious issues in terms of regulation. There's not a regulation that the City Council does not like. I found out this year that I have to have an annual bed bug inspection, and I have a violation. I didn't even know that they had passed this last year, okay? So, and then we have a very serious issue with regard to the gas pipe inspections. The problem with that is that, okay, I understand it to an extent, but there's actually very few examples of small residential properties having serious problems with gas leaks. So a small problem has become a huge bureaucratic imposition on small property owners. The biggest problem with it is that there's a $10,000 fine, and okay, it says, well, you have a whole year to get an inspection. But if there's a paperwork, a piece of paper that's not properly filed, there's an automatic $10,000 fine. So these are the kinds of things that we need to fight. This constant laying on of basically solutions to problems that don't exist, potentials for huge fines, and what I would call a taking of our property. So the way these regulations and fines are set up, small problems could balloon to huge fines where people could have $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, even $100,000 in fines accumulating on a person's property, and that for someone who has recently purchased a property would be taking their property away from them. So that's why it's important that everyone support the organization, the Ridgewood Property Owners. And so I will just announce that we're making a major effort as we come out of this COVID crisis to encourage people to shop locally and to join our organization. So we're starting a major push to increase our membership. And so we'll ask everybody who's either online publicly and here is to contact your neighbors who are not currently members and explain to them how important our organization is and to write that check for $25. You'll hear more in our newsletter. We're going to continue the newsletter all throughout this summer, and you will hear about additional membership benefits and why it's important to be a member. Also, we are planning a mayoral candidate forum, and from what we have heard from the mayoral candidates who have not yet confirmed that they are open to participating in a civic organization forum as long as it is virtual and it's on Zoom. So we are trying to set up the mayoral candidate forum for us as a civic association and possibly in coalition with one or other civic organizations for Western Queens, and it will be on Zoom. You will see it in the newsletter or in the Ridgewood Times,
And we ask that you participate and join that Zoom candidate forum. So thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, and good night.